You are on HOA rulebook. I shoveled, she documented, and the fight escalated. Gloria screamed that I had piled snow near a community sign and that was a violation and she was billing me for cleanup. Your walkway is not safe and you will pay for reinspection, she yelled while waving a snow shovel blade packed with ice held up like proof. I stood in my driveway in Davis, California, hood up against the cold, staring at the woman who had turned winter into warfare. The Tundra Trace Community Association had rules for everything, but Gloria Thompson made those rules personal. She pointed at the bag of sidewalk dicer in my hand. That is a prohibited chemical, she said. I looked at the label. It was calcium chloride, the most common dicer on the market. Gloria shook her head like I had just confessed to a felony. You think this is petty, I think this is my purpose, she said. And I knew right then that this was not going to be a normal conversation. I am a licensed electrician. I work long hours, and I cannot afford to deal with made-up violations every time the temperature drops. My home-based business license depends on staying in good standing with the city, and the HOA had already sent a letter to code enforcement claiming I was running an illegal operation out of my garage. That letter was a lie, but it was enough to get me on a watch list. Gloria stepped closer. You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee, she said. Her scarf whipped sideways in the wind. Behind her, two neighbors stood whispering with salt buckets in hand, watching the scene like it was a traffic accident. I asked her what fee she was talking about. She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket and unfolded it with theatrical precision. It was a violation notice, dated that morning, accusing me of creating a slip hazard by failing to clear ice within 12 hours of the last snowfall. The notice listed a $100 fine, plus a $50 reinspection fee if I did not fix it immediately. I pointed at my walkway. It was clear. I had shoveled it at dawn, salted it twice, and even scraped the ice ridge left by the plow. Gloria tilted her head. Not clear enough, she said. She gestured at a tiny patch of refrozen melt near the mailbox post. That is ice, and ice is a violation. I stared at the patch. It was the size of a dinner plate, barely visible under a dusting of snow. I asked her if she was serious. She smiled. Deadly serious, she said. She tapped the notice with one gloved finger. You have until noon to fix it, or the fine doubles. Then she turned and walked away, her boots crunching on the snow, leaving me standing there with a bag of diesel and a shovel blade accusation that made no sense. I went inside and called my neighbor Marcus, a former HOA board member who had quit after 3 years of watching the same pattern play out. He picked up on the second ring. Gloria again, he said before I even explained. I told him about the dicer, the shovel blade, the ice patch accusation. He sighed. She is doing forced photo inspections now, he said. She picks a target, finds a violation that does not exist, then demands proof on her timeline. If you miss the deadline, she doubles the fine and claims you are non-compliant. I asked him how she got away with it. He laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Welcome, committee chair, he said. She weaponizes move-in rules and winter rules because nobody reads the fine print. She has been doing this for 2 years, and the board lets her because she brings in fee revenue. I hung up and checked my email. There were 3 new messages from the HOA management company, all sent within the last hour. The first was a reminder about snow removal deadlines. The second was a notice that my walkway had been flagged for reinspection. The third was an invoice for $150, due within 7 days. I printed all 3 and put them in a folder. I did not know what I was building yet, but I knew I needed a paper trail. My car battery had been struggling in the cold all week, and I could not risk being stranded during a confrontation, so I plugged in the trickle charger and checked the inspection deadline again. Noon. 2 hours. I grabbed the deezer and went back outside. The wind had picked up, and the drifting snow kept recovering the walkway every time I cleared a section. I salted the ice patch near the mailbox, then swept the entire path again. A white SUV pulled up to the curb. Gloria got out, holding a phone at arm's length like she was filming. She walked up my driveway without asking permission. "I need close-up pictures," she said. "HOA policy." I asked her what policy. She did not answer. She crouched near the mailbox post and took 6 photos from different angles, narrating each one into her phone. Refrozen melt, insufficient treatment, non-compliance with Section 4.3. I stood there, watching her perform for an invisible audience. When she finished, she stood up and brushed snow off her knees. "This will go to the board," she said. "Expect a hearing notice." She walked back to her SUV and drove away. I went inside and opened my laptop. The Tundra Trace Community Association bylaws were posted on the management company website, buried under 6 layers of navigation. I found the winter maintenance section. It was 3 pages of vague language about reasonable efforts and timely response, but nothing about 12-hour deadlines or mandatory photo inspections. I kept reading. Section 4.3 did not exist. The numbering jumped from 4.2 to 4.4. Gloria had quoted a rule that was not there. I called Marcus again. He answered immediately. "She does that," he said. "She makes up section numbers because most people do not check. If you call her on it, she will say it was updated or that you are looking at an old version." I asked him what I should do. He paused. "Document everything," he said. "Every email, every notice, every photo she takes. And do not pay any fines until you see proof that the violation is real. They are counting on you paying out of fear." 2 days later, I got an email blast from the HOA. The subject line was Winter Safety Compliance Update. The body text was a passive-aggressive lecture about one resident who refuses winter safety protocols and puts the entire community at risk. My name was not in the email, but my address was. The blast went to every household in the neighborhood. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors I barely knew. Some were supportive. Most were confused. One asked if I was the guy who let ice build up and refused to fix it. I did not reply. I was too angry to trust my words. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories where HOA Karens get what they deserve. That afternoon, Gloria showed up again with a clipboard and a tape measure. She walked the perimeter of my driveway, measuring the distance between my snow pile and the nearest community sign. The sign was a wooden post with the HOA name carved into it, 15 feet from my property line. She wrote numbers on the clipboard, shaking her head the entire time. When she finished, she knocked on my door. I opened it. She held up the clipboard. "Your snow pile is within the restricted zone," she said. "That is a $200 fine, plus removal costs." I asked her what restricted zone. She pointed at the sign. "Any snow within 20 feet of association signage is prohibited under the Landscape Protection Ordinance." I had never heard of a landscape protection ordinance. I asked her to show me the rule in writing. She said it was in the appendix. I asked her which appendix. She said the updated one. I asked her when it was updated. She said it was not her job to educate me on basic compliance. Then she turned and walked back to her SUV. I closed the door and pulled up the HOA website again. There was no appendix. There was no landscape protection ordinance. There was nothing about snow pile placement except a general statement about keeping drainage clear. I called the management company. The receptionist transferred me to a property manager named Lynn. I explained the situation. Lynn listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she would look into it and get back to me. I asked her how long that would take. She said 3 to 5 business days. I told her that Gloria had already issued a fine and was threatening to bill me for snow removal. Lynn paused. "Let me check the file," she said. I heard typing. "Okay," she said. "I see the violation notice. It was submitted this morning. I do not see any documentation of a landscape ordinance." I asked her what that meant. She said it meant the fine might not be valid, but she would need to confirm with the board before she could make any changes. 3 days later, I got a certified letter. It was a notice of amenity suspension. The letter said that due to repeated noncompliance and failure to cooperate with inspections, my access to community amenities, including the clubhouse, fitness center, and guest parking, was suspended effective immediately. The suspension would remain in place until all outstanding fines were paid and a compliance audit was completed. The letter was signed by Gloria Thompson, Welcome Committee Chair. I read it twice. The amenity suspension was not about safety or snow. It was punishment for questioning her. I drove to the clubhouse that evening. The front doors were locked, but I could see people inside through the windows. I knocked. A board member I recognized opened the door. I showed him the suspension letter. He frowned. I did not know about this, he said. This is not how we usually handle things. I asked him who authorized it. He said he would have to check with Gloria. I told him Gloria was the one who issued it. He looked uncomfortable. Let me talk to the board president, he said. I will get back to you. I went home and opened the folder with all the printed emails and notices. I started building a timeline. Every violation Gloria had claimed, every deadline she had set, every fine she had issued. I cross-referenced them with the HOA bylaws and found the same pattern Marcus had described. Half the rules she quoted did not exist. The other half were real rules that she had twisted into something unrecognizable. I printed screenshots of the missing sections and highlighted the gaps. Then I went looking for the invoices. The HOA used a management company called Summit Property Group. Their website had a vendor directory. I clicked through to the snow removal contractor. The company was called Arctic Edge Services, and the owner was listed as Robert Thompson. I ran a search. Robert Thompson was married to Gloria Thompson. The HOA had been paying Arctic Edge Services for snow removal, ice treatment, and emergency plowing for the last 2 winters. Every invoice was marked up 20% above the quotes from competing contractors. I printed the invoices and added them to the folder. I called Marcus and told him what I had found. He whistled. That is a conflict of interest, he said. Board members and their families are not supposed to profit from HOA contracts. If you can prove she influenced the vendor selection, you have grounds for a complaint. I asked him how to file a complaint. He said I could submit it to the board, but Gloria would just bury it. The better option was to go to the California Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA management companies, or to request a financial audit through a petition signed by 10% of the homeowners. I did not have time for a petition. My business license hearing with the city was in 2 weeks, and if the HOA kept pushing their fabricated non-compliance claims, I could lose the license entirely. The next morning, I got another email from Gloria. The subject line was final warning. The email said that I had failed to remove the prohibited snow pile, failed to pay outstanding fines, and failed to cooperate with the reinspection process. As a result, the HOA was moving forward with a lien filing and a formal hearing to determine additional penalties. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday at 6 in the evening. Attendance was mandatory. Failure to attend would result in automatic judgment against me. I replied to the email and asked for the evidence supporting the violations. I asked for copies of the photos Gloria had taken, the specific bylaws she was citing, and the invoices showing the costs she was trying to pass on to me. I sent the email and waited. An hour later, Gloria replied. Evidence will be presented at the hearing, she wrote. All questions will be addressed at that time. I replied again and said that I had a right to see the evidence before the hearing so I could prepare a defense. She did not reply. That weekend, I went to the grocery store to pick up supplies before another storm hit. I was loading bags into my car when Gloria appeared in the parking lot. She walked straight toward me with her phone out, filming. She stopped 3 feet away and raised her voice. "Why are you refusing to comply with community safety rules?" she said loudly. Other shoppers turned to look. I said nothing. She kept talking, narrating into her phone like she was producing a documentary. This resident has repeatedly ignored violations, refused inspections, and endangered his neighbors by leaving ice hazards unaddressed. I closed the trunk and got into my car. She followed, still filming. "You cannot run from accountability," she shouted. I started the engine and backed out slowly. She stood in the middle of the parking lane, forcing me to stop. A store employee came over and asked her to move. She ignored him. I rolled down the window and asked her to step aside. She leaned in closer. "You will answer for this at the hearing," she said. I drove home and called an attorney. I explained the situation in under 5 minutes. The attorney, a woman named Rachel, listened and asked a few follow-up questions. When I finished, she said I had 2 options. Option 1 was to fight the violations through the HOA internal process, which could take months and had no guarantee of success. Option 2 was to file a complaint with the state and request an injunction to stop enforcement while the dispute was reviewed. The injunction would cost money, but it would freeze the fines and prevent the lien filing. I asked her how much. She said $1,500 up front, plus hourly billing if it went to a hearing. I did not have that kind of money sitting around, but I also could not afford to lose my business license. I told Rachel I wanted to move forward with the injunction. She said she would need copies of everything: the violation notices, the emails, the invoices, the bylaws, and any evidence I had that the rules were fabricated or selectively enforced. I sent her the entire folder. 2 days later, she called back. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "The HOA management company has a duty to verify that violations are legitimate before issuing fines. If they are just rubber stamping whatever Gloria submits, they could be liable too." I asked her what that meant for me. She said it meant we had leverage. Rachel drafted the injunction request and filed it with the county. She also sent a letter to Summit Property Group and the HOA board president, outlining the conflict of interest with Arctic Edge Services and requesting a full audit of snow removal contracts. The letter included a copy of the invoices and a highlighted section of the California Corporations Code that prohibits board members from profiting off HOA vendor contracts without full disclosure and a vote. Rachel sent me a copy. It was 6 pages of legal language, but the core message was clear: stop the enforcement or face a lawsuit. The hearing was on Monday. I showed up at the clubhouse at 5:45. The parking lot was full. Inside, the meeting room was set up with a long table at the front and rows of folding chairs facing it. Gloria sat at the center of the table, flanked by 2 other board members I did not recognize. A stack of printed photos sat in front of her. I took a seat in the back row. Marcus was already there. He gave me a small nod. Gloria called the meeting to order at 6 sharp. She read through a list of agenda items, then got to mine. "Compliance hearing for Unit 214, she said. "Resident has failed to address multiple winter safety violations despite repeated warnings." She picked up the stack of photos and held them up. These photos document ice hazards, prohibited snow placement, and use of banned chemicals. I stood up and raised my hand. Gloria ignored me. "The board will now review the evidence and determine the appropriate penalty," she said. I spoke anyway. "I would like to see the photos," I said. Gloria frowned. "You will have an opportunity to speak when the board is ready," she said. I repeated my request. "I have a right to see the evidence before you make a determination." One of the other board members, a man in his 60s, leaned forward. "Let him see the photos," he said. Gloria hesitated, then slid the stack across the table. I walked up and picked them up. The first photo showed my walkway with a tiny patch of ice near the mailbox. The second showed the snow pile near the community sign. The third was a close-up of the dicer bag with the label visible. I flipped through the rest. None of them showed anything that looked like a hazard. I asked Gloria which bylaw prohibited the dicer. She opened a binder and flipped to a page. "Section 7.2, she said. "Prohibited substances." I asked her to read it out loud. She cleared her throat. The use of any chemical substance not approved by the Landscape Committee is prohibited on common areas and private driveways. I pointed out that my driveway was private property, not a common area. She said the rule applied to both. I asked her who was on the Landscape Committee. She said the committee was currently inactive. I asked her how a substance could be approved by a committee that did not exist. She did not answer. The older board member leaned forward again. Gloria, do we have documentation of the approved substance list? He asked. Gloria shuffled through the binder. Not with me, she said. But it is standard practice to prohibit unapproved chemicals. The board member looked at me. What kind of dicer are you using? He asked. I told him calcium chloride, the same product sold at every hardware store in the county. He nodded. That is pretty standard, he said. I do not see how that is a violation. Gloria's face flushed. The rule is clear, she said. Unapproved means unapproved. The board member shook his head. We cannot enforce a rule that does not have a defined standard, he said. If there is no approved list, then there is no way for residents to comply. Gloria started to argue, but the board member cut her off. I am calling for a motion to dismiss this violation, he said. The second board member, a woman in her 50s, raised her hand. I second. Gloria stared at both of them. This is premature, she said. We have not reviewed all the evidence. The board member ignored her. All in favor, he said. 2 hands went up. Gloria did not raise hers. The motion passed. The dicer violation was dismissed. Gloria moved on to the snow pile violation. She pulled out a printout and read from it. The Landscape Protection Ordinance clearly states that snow must not be placed within 20 feet of association signage. I interrupted. There is no Landscape Protection Ordinance, I said. I have reviewed the entire bylaws document and the appendices. That ordinance does not exist. Gloria glared at me. It was added in the last update, she said. I asked her when the update was. She said last fall. I asked her if the update was posted on the website. She said it was pending. I asked her how residents were supposed to comply with a rule that was not publicly available. She said ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. The older board member sighed. Gloria, if the rule is not posted, we cannot enforce it, he said. That is basic procedure. Gloria slammed her hand on the table. This is exactly the problem, she said. We have residents who think they can ignore safety protocols because of technicalities. The board member shook his head. It is not a technicality, he said. If the rule does not exist in writing, it does not exist. I am calling for another motion to dismiss. The second board member raised her hand again. I second. Gloria stood up. This is unacceptable, she said. You are undermining the authority of this board. The board member stayed calm. All in favor, he said. 2 hands went up. The motion passed. The snow pile violation was dismissed. Gloria sat back down, her face red. She picked up the last set of photos. The walkway ice hazard, she said. This is a clear safety violation. Multiple neighbors have complained. I leaned forward. Can you provide the complaints? I asked. Gloria hesitated. The complaints are confidential, she said. I asked her how I was supposed to defend myself against anonymous complaints. She said the photos were proof enough. I pointed at the photo. That ice patch is smaller than a dinner plate, I said. I cleared it the same day you took the photo. Gloria shook her head. It was still there when I inspected, she said. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera roll. I had taken my own photos that morning, time-stamped and geotagged. I held up the phone. This is the same spot. 1 hour after your inspection, I said. No ice. Gloria leaned in to look at the screen, then sat back. That does not prove anything, she said. You could have cleared it after I left. I asked her why that would be a problem if the goal was to clear the ice. She did not answer. The older board member rubbed his forehead. Gloria, do we have any actual complaints from neighbors? He asked. Gloria opened her binder and flipped through several pages. Finally, she pulled out a single sheet of paper. Here, she said. She handed it to the board member. He read it silently, then looked up. This is a complaint about a different address, he said. Gloria grabbed the paper back. That is a clerical error, she said. The real complaints are in the file at the management company office. The board member shook his head. If they are not here, we cannot consider them, he said. I am calling for a third motion to dismiss. The second board member raised her hand. I second. Gloria did not even protest this time. The motion passed. All 3 violations were dismissed. Gloria gathered her binder and photos and stood up. This board has failed in its duty to protect this community, she said. She walked out of the room. The older board member looked at me. I apologize for the confusion, he said. We will make sure the bylaws are updated and posted clearly so this does not happen again. I thanked him and left. Outside, Marcus was waiting by his car. You did good, he said. But Gloria is not going to let this go. I asked him what he thought she would do next. He shrugged. Whatever it is, it will be ugly, he said. 2 days later, I got a call from the City Code Enforcement Office. The inspector, a man named Dave, said he had received another complaint about my home business. The complaint alleged unpermitted electrical work and unsafe storage of materials. Dave said he was required to do a site visit. I asked him when. He said he could come by that afternoon. I agreed. Dave showed up at 3. I walked him through the garage, the storage area, and the work van. Everything was organized, labeled, and up to code. Dave took photos and made notes. When he finished, he said everything looked fine. I asked him about the complaint. He pulled out a printout. It came from the HOA, he said. Same person who filed the last one. I asked him if there was any validity to it. He shook his head. No, he said. Whoever filed this does not know what they are talking about. I thanked him, and he left. I called Rachel and told her about the code enforcement visit. She said it was harassment and that we could add it to the complaint. She also told me that the HOA management company had responded to her letter. The response was defensive and claimed that all violations were issued in good faith based on board direction. Rachel said the response was weak and that the management company was trying to distance itself from Gloria. She said we should push for a full financial audit. I agreed. That weekend, I drafted a petition requesting a budget review under California Civil Code Section 5200. The law allows any homeowner to request access to HOA financial records, including vendor contracts and invoices. I needed 10% of homeowners to sign, which meant about 30 signatures. I printed 20 copies of the petition and started going door to door. Most people were supportive once I explained what Gloria had been doing. A few were skeptical. One man said he did not want to get involved. I did not push. By Sunday evening, I had 32 signatures. I submitted the petition to Summit Property Group on Monday morning. The receptionist said she would forward it to the account manager. I asked for a timeline. She said they had 10 business days to respond under state law. I thanked her and left. That afternoon, I got a text from Marcus. The board scheduled an emergency meeting, he wrote. Tonight at 7. Topic is vendor contracts. I asked him if I could attend. He said it was open to all homeowners. I showed up at 6:45. The meeting room was packed. Gloria was not there. The board president, a man named Tom, called the meeting to order. He explained that the board had received a petition requesting a financial audit and that they were legally required to provide access to the requested records. He said the board had reviewed the vendor contracts and found some irregularities. Tom paused and looked around the room. Specifically, he said, The snow removal contract was awarded to a company owned by a board member's spouse without proper disclosure or a competitive bid process. That is a conflict of interest and a violation of our fiduciary duty. The room erupted in whispers. Tom held up his hand for quiet. The board has voted to terminate the contract with Arctic Edge Services effective immediately, he said. We will be seeking bids from at least 3 contractors for next season. We are also implementing a new policy that requires full disclosure of any financial relationships between board members and vendors. Any future contracts will require a majority vote with the conflicted member abstaining. Tom continued. Additionally, the board has reviewed the recent violation notices issued to Unit 214. We have determined that the violations were not supported by the bylaws and that the enforcement process was inconsistent with HOA policy. All fines and fees associated with those violations are hereby waived. We apologize to the affected homeowner for the confusion and inconvenience. A few people clapped. I sat still, processing what I had just heard. After the meeting, Tom approached me. I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention, he said. We had no idea Gloria was running her own enforcement campaign. I asked him if Gloria would face any consequences. He sighed. She resigned from the welcome committee this afternoon, he said. She is still a homeowner, but she no longer has any official role. I asked him if the HOA would take any further action. He said the board was consulting with an attorney about potential legal issues, but that was all he could say for now. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The fines were gone. The vendor contract was terminated. Gloria had lost her position. It was not a total victory, but it was close. I parked in the driveway and noticed a note taped to my front door. I pulled it off and read it. The handwriting was shaky and angry. You think you won, but this is not over. You ruined my reputation. You cost my family income. You will regret this. It was unsigned, but I knew who wrote it. The next morning, I was loading tools into my van when a tow truck pulled up. The driver got out and walked toward my car. I asked him what he was doing. He said he had an order to tow the vehicle for expired registration. I told him my registration was current and showed him the sticker on the license plate. He looked at his clipboard, then back at the sticker. Somebody called this in, he said. Gave your address and said the tags were expired. I asked him who called it in. He said it was anonymous through the HOA tip line. I showed him my registration card. He nodded. Yeah, this is current, he said. Somebody wasted my time. He got back in the truck and left. I called Rachel and told her about the note and the tow attempt. She said it was harassment and possibly criminal depending on how far Gloria took it. She advised me to file a police report and to keep documenting everything. I went to the police station that afternoon and filed a report. The officer took my statement and said they would follow up if there were any further incidents. I asked him what constituted further incidents. He said threats, property damage, or repeated false reports. I thanked him and left. A week later, I got an email from Summit Property Group. The subject line was Resolution Notice. The email said that the HOA board had completed its review of the winter enforcement complaints and had determined that the violation process had not followed proper procedure. As a result, all penalties, fines, and suspension notices issued between December and February were being rescinded. The email also said that the board had adopted a new policy requiring actual evidence, including photos with timestamps and third-party verification, before any fine could be issued. Residents who had paid fines under the old process would receive refunds within 30 days. I forwarded the email to Rachel. She replied within minutes. This is a good outcome, she wrote. The new policy should prevent Gloria or anyone else from doing this again. Keep the email and all your records in case anything comes up later. I saved everything to a backup drive and filed the printed copies in a folder marked HOA. In March, the snow finally melted. The neighborhood looked normal again. The plowed snow piles turned into muddy puddles and then dried up. I saw Gloria once, getting into her SUV at the far end of the parking lot. She did not look at me. I did not wave. The HOA held an election in April. Tom ran for re-election as board president. Marcus decided to run for an open seat. Both won. At the first meeting of the new board, they voted to hire a new management company. Summit Property Group was replaced by a firm that specialized in transparency and compliance. The new company posted the bylaws, meeting minutes, and financial reports on a public website that did not require a login. I kept my head down and focused on work. My business license was renewed without issue. The city inspector sent me a follow-up email saying that the complaint had been closed and that my file was clean. I framed the email and hung it in the garage. It was petty, but it felt good. One evening in May, I was sitting on my front porch when Marcus walked over. He handed me a beer and sat down on the steps. "You know Gloria moved out," he said. I asked him where she went. He said she bought a condo in Sacramento, no HOA. I laughed. "That is probably for the best," I said. Marcus nodded. "The board got the final audit report," he said. "Turns out Arctic Edge was overcharging by about 30% across the board. The HOA is going after them for reimbursement." I asked him if they would get it. He shrugged. "Maybe," he said. "Probably settle for half and call it a win." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The air was warm, the sky was clear, and the streets were quiet. It felt like the kind of peace you earn. Marcus stood up. "Thanks for not letting her get away with it," he said. "A lot of people would have just paid the fines and moved on." I told him I did not have that kind of money to waste. He laughed. "Well, it worked out," he said. "See you around." He walked back to his house and I stayed on the porch, finishing the beer and thinking about how close I had come to losing everything over a bag of sidewalk dicer. The HOA held a community meeting in June to discuss the upcoming budget. I went, mostly out of curiosity. The new management company presented a line-by-line breakdown of expenses. When they got to snow removal, someone asked why the costs were so much lower than the previous year. The management rep explained that they had put the contract out for competitive bid and received several proposals. The selected contractor was local, licensed, and about 40% cheaper than Arctic Edge. Someone else asked what happened to the old contractor. The rep said the contract had been terminated for cause and that the matter was under review. Nobody asked for details. Nobody needed to. After the meeting, I ran into the older board member who had voted to dismiss my violations. He shook my hand. "Glad to see you are still here," he said. "I heard you had a rough winter." I told him it could have been worse. He nodded. "Gloria was out of control," he said. "I tried to rein her in, but she had Tom convinced that strict enforcement was the only way to maintain property values. It took your petition to wake us up." I thanked him for listening. He said that was his job. "I appreciate you rolling with the chaos."